in ways which don't require as much simplification, in ways that recognize the true complexity of the world. You may be able to share the way we think about the world.
Make his presentation.
So, hi everyone. I'm very grateful to be here to talk about Games for Peace. I know we have choice this morning, so thank you everyone. We hope not to disappoint. And Games for Peace is an Israeli NGO run by Israeli Jews and Arabs that uses multiplayer video games to build trust between youth in Israel, particularly between Jewish and Arab youth. So I'm going to start by using an obvious statement. Children everywhere love to play games. This has always been right, and a lot has been said here yesterday about this. I remember the wonderful children's panel from yesterday where the word play was mentioned once, over and over again. So, and this is a very important basis of our work, and I'm going to substitute this for a more modern version of this statement and say that children everywhere love to play video games. This has become a fact of life. Let me just share a bit of data with you. This is quite recent. The last survey was done in 2019, and you can have a look at the numbers yourself. I think the most striking piece of data here is not the actual number for 2019, but the difference between the 2018 survey numbers and the 2019 numbers. So you can see that for the youngest age group, the number of hours spent playing video games has increased from 7 hours a week to almost 8 hours a week within 1 year. And I have to stress this does not include screen time that is not spent using video games. So for example, the number of hours my children spend watching other people play video games on YouTube, which many of us parents, I think, are familiar with, this is not included in this chart. So I'm not going to go into this minefield debate of the pros and cons of screen time. I have my views on it, but I think for the basis of this presentation, I'm going to regard this as a fact. This is a growing part, a very important part of young people's lives. And I think in my field, in the conflict mitigation field or trust building field, this means that an important question has to be asked, and this is whether we can somehow take advantage of this fact, of the fact that video games play such an important role in young people's lives on both sides of a conflict, and whether we can use that to build trust, to reduce stereotypes between two sides. And that's exactly the question that we are exploring at Games for Peace. And I'd like to focus on a particular genre of video games which we utilize at Games for Peace, and that is multiplayer online video games. So for those of you not familiar with multiplayer video games, they involve a very strong game server which hosts an online game world in which multiple players can have adventures, can interact. They share this world. They can be dozens, hundreds, even thousands of players. And they have experiences together. This is in contrary to single-player computer games, which actually still consist of the majority of video games. But this specific genre of video games exhibits some very, very peculiar characteristics which are extremely beneficial, we believe, to the kinds of programs that we run. And I'm going to run through a few of them. So the first thing is that meaningful relationships are formed in online multiplayer games. And I've heard countless stories of gamers who told me that they have extremely meaningful relationships with people who are otherwise strangers, who they've never met before. Sometimes they would describe these relationships as being some of the most significant relationships in their lives at that time. So meaningful relationships are capable of forming in online video games. The next important characteristic is, and I think this is literally groundbreaking, is that geographical boundaries do not matter. You could interact with a person who is not only not in the same room with you, but that person could also be not in the same city, and she could be not in the same country as well. So these, the real-life equivalent of this kind of encounter in two sides of a conflict could be either impossible because of political and logistical and safety reasons, or it could be a logistical or political nightmare to produce. And yet, within a video game, this becomes a very, very, very simple possibility. So this is groundbreaking in terms of the possibilities it opens up. Thirdly, multiplayer video games allow for a more equal for a more equal encounter. When we play video games, when we play multiplayer video games, we are all game characters. So whether we are Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, matters less in a video game encounter. Whether we come from a strong or a poor socioeconomical background, etc., matters less. In fact, I would say that, there's one more thing, one more important thing. Video games unite players around common goals. We, as players in sharing this same world, we want to win that treasure. We want to build that castle. We want to slay that zombie. We have common goals which unite us and give us a feeling of unity. They provide a bond, they form a bond. So I would say that the experience of playing in a multiplayer online world forms an alternative identity. And this alternative identity is the basis around which our programs are based. And of course, I'm far, far from ruling out our real-life identity. This is the one and only major identity in our lives. But I think this alternate identity can form as an anchor for an encounter, or as a springboard for an encounter that can happen from a much more open point of entry. So Games for Peace is an NGO, and it was started based on all these promises that I've just described. And it was based on the following principles. First of all, I think probably the first thing that people who hear the name Games for Peace ask me is, so you develop games, right? And then I go, no, we do not develop games. We develop experiences, not games. And what we do is we select the most popular multiplayer games out there, and we base experiences based on these games. We carve experiences and programs based on these games, and we choose only the games which answer to the characteristics I just described earlier. Games that invite players to collaborate, to create contact, to interact. So this is a very, very conscious decision that I'd like to talk about, because I think the choice of not developing our own game not only has a very significant economic aspect to it. Developing good games is a very expensive business, but it also addresses the elephant in the room regarding developing games which are specifically designed to educate something. And I will say it a bit bluntly, children do not want to play these games. When children go back home, they want to play Minecraft, they want to play Fortnite, they want to play World of Warcraft, they want to play the games they love. So if we can design an effective intervention program based on games children love, then that program would be so much more effective. So the conscious choice of not developing our own games is actually removing a huge potential point of failure out of the picture. And that's the rationale for this choice. And the last basis is we wanted to create an apolitical gaming experience. We did not seek deep identity discussion. We want to create a shared positive experience that will serve as an anchor for a deeper meeting point later on. So these are the principles that I and my colleagues formed Games for Peace around. And I'd like to start with an event which we started our activities with. We no longer produce the Play for Peace weekends, but I think it's important to describe, and I'd just like to have a quick show of hands and ask who does not know what Minecraft is. Who here doesn't know what Minecraft is? Great, don't be shy. Great, so you can ask the person right sitting next to you what Minecraft is, but I'll just say it's one of the most popular video games out there. It's a multiplayer online game, and it's this three-dimensional world which looks pretty much like an old video game. It has this Lego brick look. I should say that Microsoft bought this game from Swedish game developer Mojang for $2.5 billion. That was a few years ago. And in Minecraft, players can... I would say that Minecraft introduced a new genre in video games, which is called sandbox games. And these games do not offer the typical linear storyline where you go through a bunch of challenges and then win or not in the end. But rather it presents you with an open world which is open for you to explore and have adventures. And there's really no way of winning Minecraft. So you could spend your time there building fantastic creations, or fighting monsters, or digging underneath the ground and finding fantastic treasures. And when you do that with your friends online, the experience is augmented by the multiplayer experience. So, is that 3 minutes for the entire talk? For me? I thought I had 30 minutes. So I have 20 minutes of talk. Wow, all right. I'll move on. So how much do I have left? 3 minutes left. Wow, all right. So I'll move on. I'd like to, I thought I had 30. So what? Yeah, we were told we had 30 minutes. Should I move on or 10 minutes? Yay. So I'll just briefly go through that. This was the first event that we produced, and we invited players from across the Middle East. It was at a ridiculously low budget, and we invited them to play Minecraft for a weekend. And this actually happened. About 200 players from Israel, from Palestine, from Saudi Arabia, from Jordan, from Egypt, played Minecraft for a weekend, built these wonderful constructs, and had these very simple interactions. And I will just say that I think this was probably one of the most normal moments in the history of the Middle East, to see this event happening. And I have so much more to say about this, but we could probably conclude that in the questions and answers session. So I will move on to our school program. And one thing perhaps which is important to say about our school program is that the Israeli education system is divided, is separate. We have an independent education system for the Arab sector and for the Jewish sector, for language and cultural and religious differences. And this is really great for fostering ignorance and fear of the other, so it's working. And what are interventions? We also use Minecraft in this program, and what it does is that once a week, at the same day and the same hour, two classes, one from a Jewish school and one from an Arab school, they sit together from each school's computer classroom, and they meet in a virtual world, and they play Minecraft together. The experiences they go to are designed to foster increasingly more and more interaction and collaboration. Now, they don't play one against each other. We have red team and blue team, and each team is divided equally between each of the schools. So red team is half Jewish and half Arab, and blue team likewise. And they have to bridge the gap of languages and so on for this to work. And if you could just show the video for a second, I would really like to show you how this looks in real life, the virtual interactions. Now I'm really conscious about the time. All right. So the program starts off with two players, one from the Jewish school and one from the Arab school, meeting in this virtual escape room. And eventually they realize that they have to work together to break out of this virtual escape room. So one has to push this button to open the other player's door and so on. And they have to work through a series of puzzles to get out of this escape room together. This is how an actual lesson looks like. And after they manage to do that, they spend the rest of the lesson interacting through the game's chat system and asking each other questions to get to know each other better about real life. So later sessions actually grow in size, and they have a variety of adventures. We have a scavenger hunt session, which is, I think, the one you're looking at now. And the final, the culmination of the online experience is a final project, which both teams select in an inter-school democratic process, and they spend 2 weeks building that wonderful project. It could be the Big Ben or the Eiffel Tower or a pyramid or a football stadium. They choose what they have to do, and they distribute the workload between themselves. So thank you. If you could get back to the presentation. So this is how the virtual sessions look like, but that's not all. After halfway through the process, the children actually meet face to face, and this is where the real magic, so to speak, happens. Because what we see time and time again is that the first thing that students do is look for that player that they had, that they built that castle with, that they shared this experience with, that they slayed that monster with. And the virtual experience is a springboard for curiosity, for opening of the heart, instead of, as we see in many other similar intervention programs, a very suspicion and fear and hesitation. So I think this is really where the magic of real life and virtual world comes together. I will, with your permission, skip through through an evaluation that is very encouraging from our side. We are an acknowledged program by the Israeli Ministry of Education. We were honored to receive the Intercultural Innovation Award by the UNAOC and BMW Group. Last year, for the first time, we ran Play to Talk between two schools in Western and Eastern Jerusalem, which is significant because Eastern Jerusalem Palestinians do not hold an Israeli ID, and there was extreme reluctance initially to run this program. We had a lot of negotiation going on, and finally we agreed to run this program without the face-to-face interactions. We only agreed to have the virtual part. So the program started, and after some very positive sessions, the resistance subsided, and eventually we did decide on having a face-to-face encounter in a neutral meeting place, and it was quite wonderful. And the result was that both of the schools actually asked us to repeat this encounter this year, and these are populations which, to the best of my knowledge, no school program has managed to bring together so far. So this is extremely encouraging and something we are very, very proud of. How much time do we have? So far. One of the most interesting things, and I know a lot of talk here has been about the role of the teacher in 21st century classrooms and how important really is the teacher with all this advancement in automated learning and AI and so on. So one thing we are seeing time and time again is that programs work best when the school team accompanying the program is engaged, is championing the program, is involved. So the teachers who are accompanying the children, the headmaster, when they believe in the program works. And when this is just something thrown at the children without the proper system backing, then it is less effective. So again, the emotional support and the backing of the teachers is crucial. So this is one lesson we've learned. Schools are, sadly, in Israel, sometimes not prepared to run such IT-intense programs. So we prepared backups. We bought 3G mobile cell connections and laptops and so on, and this sometimes saved the day in certain cases. And one other important lesson is that there is no substitute for the face-to-face encounter. This is where, as I said, the magic happens. And I wrote down yet. I had some second thoughts about this yet, but I do believe in it. I think the day will come where it will be possible to create equivalently significant encounters in the virtual space. We're not quite there yet, as we see. And the fact that our face-to-face encounters have no screens involved, it's all outdoors, same teams, but the equivalent is the experience is multisensory, and it is face-to-face, has enormous significance. The virtual experience is the best springboard to such an encounter that I know. Long-term impact is still a challenge for us. After the program ends, we still do not have a good solution for how to keep the children engaged. So this is something we are still researching. We would love to create a viral world where this would just grow by itself. I think if there's one platform which could allow that, it is multiplayer online video games. So I would end off, and I see I'm going to end off with even some time left, so hopefully you can have some extra. Some takeaways for educators. Minecraft Education Edition. Oh, by the way, the other question I always get asked is, so you guys make Minecraft, right? And to which I answer, no, this is owned by Microsoft. And then, of course, 1 week later, the same person meets me and says, so you guys make Minecraft, right? So I'm going to say this one more. We only use Minecraft, and we will use other games in the future. We use popular games who are beneficial to, who work with the principles I've described. Now, this year we have transited to Minecraft Education Edition, which is a version of Minecraft which is tailored for school use. It's very, very much simplified in terms of administration. I won't say much about it, but I really encourage all educators here to go check it out. I actually stopped at the Microsoft booth in this exhibition and asked them whether they're showcasing Minecraft, and sadly they said no. I think this is maybe the one technology that is that could be super relevant for education, for 21st century education. Another interesting question: who here thinks that this looks like some kind of screenshot from a sci-fi movie? Yeah, just all right. So this is actually a real-world event. It's esports. It's an esports event. These are video games, competitive video games, and you're looking at people who come to see their teams compete for $1 million prizes. And we think this is probably the next big thing in the kind of work that we are doing. And I think I'm going to stop here and thank you all. I hope this was interesting for you.
Jennifer. Let me ask you a question. How many of you remember the 90s or were kids in the 90s? Raise your hands. Okay, so I'm not the only one here. So the big part of my conscious childhood basically happened in the 90s, where we had very dramatic and dynamic events from the part of the world they come from. I was only 6 years old when the Berlin Wall fell, marking, at least officially, the end of the communist era and the Iron Curtain. I said officially because it took between 1 and 2 decades for those countries to become an integral part of Europe. I am going to give you an example. It was basically 2001 when me, as a middle-class Bulgarian, traveled for the first time to Western Europe, basically 12 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And even then, I was shocked. What I have to tell you that at this time, we didn't really have a lot of education towards global citizenship. Everything at that time was still very much shaped by the education from the communist era, which was very much targeting excellence in hard skills. So the only way to really get some kind of sense of the global issues was through the TV and later on through internet. And I remember there was one cartoon, I don't know how many of you remember it, and was it really popular in India. It was called Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Raise your hands if you remember it. It was great, right? So for those who don't know, basically what was it? It was telling the story of Captain Planet and 5 teenagers from all over the world who were basically targeting some different global issues, mainly in terms of environmental protection. It really caught the zeitgeist of that time because apart from environmental issues, it was also dealing with a lot of things like diversity, tolerance, justice. It was tackling in different episodes issues like drug abuse, also HIV and so on. And the characters were very well picked from different backgrounds. They were from South America, North America, from Asia, from Africa, and Europe. Actually, the European character was from Eastern Europe, so as I said, it really caught the zeitgeist of that time. However, I'm here not to tell you about this cartoon because I have nothing to do with it, apart from being a big fan of it. I'm not also going to tell about some political events that happened 3 decades ago in the other side of the world. I'm going to tell you about some new approaches and tools that we are doing in order to promote global citizenship education, especially through the lenses of the rule of law and culture of lawfulness. So, my name is Jan Frensky. I work for Education for Justice Initiative as part of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Vienna, where since 2016 we are working on trying to reimagine the tools and methods to promote global citizenship in order to contribute, to prepare the new kids and equip them with tools to contribute to a more just, peaceful, tolerant, and of course, sustainable world. So first of all, I want to shed a bit light on what are the 2 concepts that I just mentioned. One is being the rule of law, the other culture of lawfulness. First of all, the rule of law is something that's already tackled by the SDGs. It's part of SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And Target 3 tells about promote the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensure equal access to justice for all. So, but what exactly is the rule of law? I'm going to use another interpretation from an official UN document which says a principle of governance in which all persons, institutions and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced and independently adjudicated, and which are consistent with international human rights, norms and standards. It requires as well measures to ensure adherence to the principles of the primacy of law, equality before the law, accountability to the law, fairness in the application of the law, separation of powers, participation in decision-making, legal certainty, avoidance of arbitrariness, and procedural and legal transparency. That's quite a lot. I'm going to tell you in simple words, it's basically the notion that the rule should apply and that we are all equal before the law. And we all have access to justice. So that's basically what the rule of law is in simple words. And the other concept that I just said is called culture of lawfulness. It's basically, it relates very much to the rule of law because it describes the social and the cultural environment in where the rule of law is protected and respected. I'm going to use a very interesting description about what culture of lawfulness means from one of our participants that we had at a joint expert consultation meeting with UNESCO in 2018. He said, "To me, lawfulness is when a woman knows that she has legal rights in her country just like a man does. It is when a foreign worker knows that if he didn't get his monthly salary from his employer, he can go and ask for it legally just like a local employee can. It is when a government employee from a different religious group is entitled to a promotion for a higher position just like his colleague from the dominant group has." I'm gonna elaborate a bit more on that and add it's also when a household can hold the local authorities or the local businesses accountable when they fail to deal with air or water pollution. It's also when a young entrepreneur can protect their businesses from the big monopolies. It's also when a foreign student can come to another country and enjoy the same healthcare protection as the local ones. And if people are not empowered to do that, how are you going to deal with another issues? How are they going to deal with climate action? How are they going to work on poverty and reduce hunger? How are they going to have a good well-being and health, or even start working on their innovation, on their businesses, and create value for their societies and communities? Now I'm done with the theoretical part, and I'm going to tell you what we have done so far at UNODC to develop tools that are going to shape our new generation of global citizens. As I said, we had several goals. One of them was to develop tools that can promote the rule of law and culture of lawfulness. We want to develop skills and embrace social values for those youngsters. We actually wanted them to become more vocal and to work on their behavioral attitude towards promoting culture of lawfulness. So we wanted for them to be stronger and to advocate for stronger institutions too. And we want them to promote culture of lawfulness in their communities. Of course, we had a few challenges. First of all, that we were doing it a very broad target group. It was 6 years until 18 years, so secondary and primary education. And we wanted to address the three global citizen education domains of learning as defined by UNESCO. It's the cognitive, the SEL, and the behavioral. And last but not least, we had to comply with some UN standards and regulations. After having a long empathizing and long ideation phases, we found out that we need three things. We need to have everything about those tools to be happening in a fantasy world. We want to have, here is actually where the fun part comes, so bear with me. We want to have characters that the kids can relate to, and we wanted to use transmedia approach, so having the very same word incorporated in different media, like cartoons, like books, like also games, of course. So why fantasy world? I'm gonna tell you a story that happened in the very first event we had together at UNODC, because during our advertising phase, we were conducting workshops and hackathons in order to engage with users and know what they want. So I remember the very first hackathon we had, it was in South Africa, and I decided to survey the kids what is their favorite game, and 60% of them answered, guess which one? Anyone? It's GTA. Do you know the Grand Theft Auto? So, and then we hit a wall with that, and we decided to, I basically asked like, why do you like GTA? And there was one guy who stood up and said, because I can kill people. And then I was like, I really admired the bravery of this guy to say this during an event organized by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. But I like, can I dare to ask, why is that? And I got a very simple and very elaborated answer, which was like, I can do, because I cannot do that in real life. So we realized from now on that most of those things in entertainment is all about escaping reality. And we wanted to give them the escape of reality, but we couldn't actually give them violence because we are UNODC, so we opted for a non-violent version of all of the tools that we're working on. So yeah, they got the fantasy word in order to avoid any issues, cultural and stuff like that. We set up this word in a planet far away from Earth, with inhabitants who have nothing to do with human beings. And the story tells about a planet that was very beautiful and with great flora and fauna, and was inhabited with a very advanced civilization that at some point completely collapsed. It happened because some series of mistakes, like not respecting the others, not respecting some social values, and also last but not least, not having global citizenship mindset. The next thing, we knew that we want to have a fantasy world will be worth nothing without characters. We want to create characters that kids can relate to. At the very beginning, we were advised to go with some superheroes, the superheroes of justice, who are going to, promote the values that we want to promote. The thing is that we found out the superheroes have some kind of issues. First of all, they don't really they can send like a wrong message to kids. I mean, if I'm not a superhero, what's going to happen? I mean, can I be basically a carrier of those values too if I'm not a superhero? And the other thing is that superheroes also have the aura of being the chosen ones. So they get their superpowers from somewhere because, you rarely get the story behind how they get superpowers. They're always like out of, okay, they were the chosen ones. What if I'm not the chosen one? And the superheroes were developed and were very popular for my generation and the generations before, where what happened was that we were very keen on showing strengths and strong skills, but the things about weaknesses and shortcomings were very often a taboo, even like in some extremities, like hiding the people with disabilities from our society. Nowadays, we are much more open when you talk about shortcomings, weaknesses, and even disabilities. So we decided to go the other way around and start with characters who have disabilities, and they accept their disabilities and learn how to use them in their advantage. This is how we came up with 4 different characters. While they're escaping the war, terrible things happen to them. And this guy Sentimo, he lost his sight, but he started seeing with his heart and became the empathetic person in the team. Then we have Intella. She lost the protection shell on her head, which allowed her brain to grow, and she started processing information very quickly. She's the brainiac in the team and the one who everybody relies on critical thinking. Then we have another very strong lady. She lost her legs, and while learning to learn without legs, she developed very strong muscles in her arms, so she becomes the one who is always ready to give hands. And last but not least, we have a guy who is called Signal, and he basically lost the ability to speak, but he became a very good listener, and he's dealing with conflict resolution. So we have an empathetic guy, we have a critical thinking guy, and we have a team worker, and of course a conflict resolution guy. And all of them share the same values of integrity, respect, fairness, and acceptance. This brings me to the transmedia, because you saw that there were like a 2D version and a 3D version of the different characters. It was very important for us to have those, as I said before, in different media, because it gives various types of access points to the world of the Zorbs, first. And second, it also tackles different, addresses different target groups. We have, for example, books and videos that are more fit for primary school kids, where we want to avoid them playing video games, while video games, for example, are much more fit, and you cannot have anything without them which is entertaining for teenagers. And the other big benefit from the transmedia is also that you can have different creators. We give ownership to different creators to work on their books, stories, games that are built on the world of the Zorbs. And for example, the initial story and the characters were created by me, but you have a lot of people now who are working on the games and the books. And for example, Elisa, say hi. Her company has done the books and the videos that are online now. And we also have the game that I'll be talking in a while. That is actually developed currently in India by an Indian team in Delhi. And which brings me to that one. It's called Zorb Reloaded. So there are multiple periods of time in the Zorb's world. One is before the disaster happened. The other is the videos for primary school kids, which happens on Earth, where the four Zorbs are telling their story and what went wrong. And then we have the Zorbs Reloaded, which is for teenagers. And the idea of that game is that after they spend several years on Earth, the kids are going back to the Zorb to rebuild it. But this time they have to rebuild it having in mind social values, having in mind the idea that they need to protect the planet from a new disaster. I'm gonna give a bit of like sneak peek of the game, which by the way is going online on the App Store and Google Play today. It was actually online 2 hours ago, so it's ready for downloading. I hope the video is gonna play now. Yeah, it's starting. So it's a typical city builder game where you need to build different constructions to manage population growth. You need to expand the habitable area. The habitable area is the green one, so you need to clear the tiles around in order to make the planet livable again. You have different, however, challenges. You need to do that while protecting core values. For example, fairness. If you build a school, make sure that the school has the capacity to fit all of your citizens, otherwise your fairness levels go down. Same goes for all of other resources and all of other buildings. What's also interesting, because we are talking not only about values, we are talking about the concepts of rule of law and cultural lawfulness. Very interesting part of the game is that you can get scrutinized by your citizens, so they can demand different things related to their right to be a citizen on that planet. And also, once you build a courthouse, they will actually start filing different cases against you, and if they win the case, which happens if you have not performed very well, what's gonna happen is that you can get suspended from playing the game for several hours. So you are suspended as a ruler of the planet Zorb. The other interesting thing is that you keep on communicating with your citizens. They're not only always going to scrutinize you, but sometimes they're going to offer you things that you have to be careful accepting or not. Because they can offer you things that if you accept to, you might not show integrity and you might not treat anyone the very same way. Another interesting piece is that the official currency of the game, if you have played similar games like Clash of Clans or Dominations, you can pay to boost your development. In our case, because we are the UN, we cannot ask them to pay anything, so the official currency of the game is being gained by the so-called missions to Earth, where you're tasked to travel to Earth and solve puzzles related to justice and crime prevention, which is another way of having a cognitive method of learning more about crime prevention and justice. So we have values. This is the value screen, which you always need to pay attention of. You have like the scrutinizing element with the courthouse, and you have different also Easter eggs that you're gonna find once you start playing the game. So I'm not gonna, this is the puzzles that you need to solve for your moral points in order to boost your development. I'm not gonna go more into details because, and I'm gonna reveal more because the game, as I said, is available online. If you need any information, just shoot me an email. You can also receive a basic teacher's guide, how to use this in classroom. Also, if you connect with us, we can give you a bit more about the other tools that we are working on for different age groups. And they're not the only ones. I mean, we're currently working on many more, but I cannot reveal a lot because they're top secret, and I will need to send you on a ship to Zorp and leave you there if I tell you something. So, all in all, what we are doing here is trying to reimagine the tools for global citizenship for Gen Z. I think so far we have done a good progress. The C has done a very good progress to that. But I also want to believe that we are not alone in this journey. So we want to ask you for your help, any kind of feedback, ideas, or in any possible way if you can help us further develop those products and make them better fit for your needs and help us basically shape the new generation of global citizens who are going to be the new advocates and the contributor for a better, more just, more sustainable, more tolerant and diverse world. Thank you very much.
Wait for the timer to start. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Engaging, rewarding, experiential, interactive, dynamic, and equip our learners with 21st century skills. Shashi Tharoor, Indian politician and author, pointed out that education is not just a social and economic issue, it's a national security issue. And in the age of the internet, he argues in favor of a well-formed mind as opposed to a well-filled one. There is reason to believe, in all seriousness, that by playing games, children and adults can develop well-formed minds. From chess that was used to develop strategic thinking in the Middle Ages to the introduction of theories of play in the 18th and 19th century and gamification of the 21st century, games have played pivotal roles as learning tools for centuries. However, having fun in higher education is often viewed, in the words of bell hooks, as potentially disruptive to the atmosphere of seriousness assumed to be essential to the learning process. Fun and games are assumed to be the antithesis of work. Contrary to popular belief, years of research on the brain, the seat of learning, can prove otherwise. Drawing evidence from neuroscience, Dr. Barbara Oakley points out that the brain uses two very different learning modes, the focused and the diffused. In theory and practice, games and play fit quite snugly in the diffuse learning space. When in play, we enter a make-believe world, an altered state that doesn't counter learning but can potentially stimulate intellectual and academic engagement. Joanna's session yesterday on Futuro cards is a perfect example. Game-based simulations, according to Cup, give experience meaning and provide a set of boundaries within a safe environment to explore, think, and try new things out. Games and simulations enable what is known as situated understanding or situated learning. So in situated learning approach, knowledge and skills are learned in context that reflect how knowledge is obtained and applied in everyday situations. This is based on the premise that knowledge is not independent, but fundamentally situated, being in part a product of activity, context, and culture in which it is developed. We live in the best of times and the worst of times. We are in an era of human evolution where we can harness the technology and pedagogical knowledge in order to accelerate learning, develop higher order skills, and improve retention. We also live in an age where technological advancements are poised to restructure traditional educational institutions and job markets. They have transformed the very fabric of our society, and some even threaten to erode the civic values and stability in the world. Now, several organizations have developed teaching resources which include activities, online and tabletop games to promote student understanding of concepts like democratic values and human rights. In today's presentation, I'll deep dive into Frederick Norman Stiftel's role in gamification of political science education by bringing to the fore 5 games that simplify difficult abstract concepts like democracy, human rights, tolerance, and conflict resolution. We will also take a closer look at Sim Democracy, a game which was named as one of the 20 most innovative learning materials on democracy in the 2014 World Forum for Democracy, organized by Council of Europe. Now, several regional variations of this game also exist, and at this point, I would like to acknowledge the exceptional support from Dr. Mary, who is the Foundation's Stylet project manager. She and her team have developed, implemented, and contextualized most of these games. I was first introduced to Sim Democracy in 2014 during my Teach for India fellowship, and I've been playing the game ever since. I made a few tweaks for the Indian context, and I've noticed that players respond very well to the game. It can be integrated into syllabus at various levels. Now, being an academic, I rely on data. So, at the beginning of this year, I set out to quantify the impact of this game and to gain knowledge about my students' understanding of concepts like democracy and citizenship. So I've conducted a pre and a post-game survey. I do acknowledge the fact that it's not easy to measure civic and political engagement. Nonetheless, it's important to attempt the same, because again, there is reason to believe that civic activities can have considerable political relevance and can consequently develop citizens who emulate core democratic values. I will end my presentation with the results so far of my ongoing study. So about the Frederick Norman Foundation. It's a German foundation dedicated to promoting liberal principles and political education with the aim of inculcating principles of freedom and democracy for all people in all areas of society, both in Germany and across the world. Now, the foundation is active in 60 countries across 6 continents. The regional offices in these countries work to support human rights, rule of law, and democracy. Apart from fostering international and transatlantic dialogue through conferences, study tours, and publications, the foundation also supports local, regional, and national initiatives towards strengthening democratic values and human rights. One such initiative is the development of games for democracy. So the first game today is developed by the Indian office. The Poll is a board game that simulates how political parties in India fight and win elections. Abir Kapoor, journalist and creator of the game, covered elections in several states in India and strongly believes that politics and policies affect us, the citizens, who need to understand the electoral process. And hence, he felt the need to create a game on the Indian elections. The next one is human rights cards. According to the Frederick Norman Foundation, the objective of the human rights cards is to equip teachers with simple, creative, and innovative human rights education tools that students can identify with in order to encourage dialogue related to human rights among children. Now, there are two versions. One is for primary students, and the one that you see on screen is meant for older players. The rights card consists of human rights violation scenario cards and solution cards. The team that solves the most scenarios wins. Now, this game fosters critical and analytical skills, which brings about active discussions on human rights in our society. Players in this game are introduced to a diverse set of narrators. Each of these narrators describes a conflict scenario. From the perspective of a chosen player, players have to correctly identify the conflicting parties' needs in order to find a solution that is mutually satisfactory to both sides. The next game is called Media and Information Literacy Card Game, which encourages players to take a critical approach to media. Nominated for the Democracy Award at the World Forum for Democracy, organized by the Council of Europe and held in Strasbourg, France last month, this game aims to raise awareness among young students about media and how they consume and create it. Coming to Sim Democracy. Developed in 2011, this board game is a simulation of a simple democratic community and can be played with students from high school to university and the general public. I have a really short video to explain the game. Can we have the sound, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Please go back. I'm really sorry, I'm getting used to the clicker.
Don't you think that the democracy system is too complicated to learn? The innovative Sim Democracy game is a model that narrates the livelihood of democracy, where players are engaged to gain first-hand experience for better understanding in short time. It is democracy in animation, where the world politics all come to life. Sim Democracy, an interactive educational tool that simulates a democratic community where players have different roles and can actively perform tasks along with responsibilities in society. Players can be the government that runs the country, or the citizens who earn, pay taxes, and actively monitor the government administration. Players can also make their own policy and campaign themselves to be elected. Here, the fundamental elements and better understanding of public policy, along with democratic values, are fostered. Most importantly, it raises questions on political issues in young minds. It all started in 2011. Sim Democracy, with its crew, has first implementation with high school students in the far north of Thailand. And with the collaboration of the Election Commission of Thailand and non-formal and informal education, the game has been implemented in various institutions across Thailand. And in 2012, a regional and national Sim Democracy game competition was held for the first time. Believing that Sim Democracy game could be a tool and platform to maintain and improve democracy around the world. It has also been introduced abroad. Now, over 2,000 people from Thailand, Bhutan, Myanmar, Malaysia, South Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, and India are trained. For players to attain most efficiency, the creator team has created manual for guidelines and instructions for teachers, plus activities in classroom and training for trainers' workshops having immediate game evaluation for further development. In order to make the most out of this learning tool, we provide an access for all to engage through Sim Democracy mobile game application for free. It is important for young generation to know and realize that more than just academic knowledge, democracy is rather a way of life.
So this game is centered around 4 key areas: free and fair elections, active citizen participation, protection of rights of citizens, and application of rule of law. So as you can see, the board is divided into 4 sectors. And I'm going to skip through the next few slides in the interest of time. But students get to see the policy sheets. They have money. They also know what problems are there in their own sector, and they need to come up with solutions and budget for those problems. They are given the right to vote. After which the team that is elected gets to put in the money into the budget board, and the game carries on. The players get to earn income, and at the end of a session, they even pay tax. So this is one of the key components of the game, where you have the problem chips and you have solutions to tackle these various problems. You can see here's the income card. So players know exactly when they need to pay tax. They are given good star deeds when they perform good activities. And at the end of the game, they also need to evaluate their leaders. Another component of the game is situation cards. These situations have been contextualized for different countries, which I'll talk about in just a few seconds. Now, Sim Democracy, as you've seen in the video, has been played in several countries till date, from Thailand to Zimbabwe. It is available in languages other than English. And in some versions, the situation cards, the boards, and the chips have been contextualized to suit its intended audience. So if you see this is a version for Bhutan. The clothing style of the 2 women in the picture reflect the clothing style in Bhutan. This is also the case for the version for Myanmar, which is available in Burmese. The version for Malaysia is also available in Malay and includes representation of women with a headscarf. Now, the most professed religion in Malaysia is Islam, and the board acknowledges that some women are clad in a headscarf. The game version for Indonesia is also has similar changes in the dress code. In addition, the constraint chips that you see, the constraint chips has also changed. Over here, one of the chips includes the durian fruit, which is native to Southeast Asia. As for the version for India, I have tweaked the situation cards for the Indian context to include seasonal problems like landslides due to monsoons and some equivalents. For example, in the original version for Thailand, a situation card was about people joining the Royal Agricultural Project for reforestation, and which I've contextualized it for our students as citizens join the reforestation project. Now, why and how to map Sim Democracy to our curriculum? So you see, the National Curriculum Framework highlights that as a nation, we have been able to sustain a robust democratic polity. The vision for democracy is articulated by the Secondary Education Commission. It is important for us to foster democracy as a way of life rather than only a system of governance and values enshrined in the Constitution. NCF also states that experiences of social cultural world also needs to be part of the curriculum. Children need to find examples of plurality of people and a way of life represented in the textbooks. Further, the space for peace education within the framework is compellingly clear in the light of the escalating trends of and taste for violence globally, nationally, and locally. Education is a significant dimension for the long-term process of building up of peace, tolerance, justice, intercultural understanding, and civic responsibilities. Now, concepts related to democracy, constitution, and rights are formally introduced in middle school, which is an advisable age to start playing sim democracy. In secondary school, students deep dive into political science. The game dynamics of sim democracy, in my opinion, also helps hone 21st century skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, collaboration, leadership, and social skill, among others. The game relies also on spoken language, as participants have to defend their budget policy and their point of view on resource management. They also are encouraged to use their persuasive skills while campaigning, rallying the citizens or the government to brainstorm and solve critical issues. Hence, sim democracy is also an effective teaching tool in language courses where participants explore spoken language in context. Sim democracy results and discussion. 16 statements that are taken from the Likert type items on student concepts were published in IEA's 2004 Civic Education Study and is related to democracy, citizenship, and government responsibilities. A total of 133 students participated in the study this year, and they ranged from middle school to postgraduate students. While 97% of the participants were Indian nationals, 3% of participants were nationals from countries in Africa and Central Asia. Participants' age ranged from 10 to over 30. 31% identified as male and 69% identified as female. So section 1 of the survey was dedicated to participants' conceptual understanding of democracy. Over 91% of participants believed that when everyone has a right to vote, it was good. It was good or somewhat good for democracy. However, pre-game, 3% of the participants believed that it's very bad for democracy when citizens have a right to elect political leaders freely. This, according to me, was quite disturbing. This number dropped marginally in the post-game survey, where 2% believed that it was somewhat bad for democracy. Now you see, participants overall, there were 80% of the participants that indicated that it's good for democracy when leaders can be freely elected. Majority of participants also acknowledged that when political parties have different opinions and positions on important issues, it was good. It's also good that when people join political parties in order to influence government policies. Section B was dedicated to an individual's role in democratic society. Majority of the participants here believe that voting in elections is important. In the pre-game survey, about 42% believed that joining a political party is not really important in order to be a good citizen. But post-game, their opinion swung in the other end of the spectrum. 62% of participants stated that it was somewhat important or very important that good citizens join a political party. Section C dealt with participants' understanding of the responsibilities of the government. Post-game, there was generally an increase in the percentage of participants that believed that it's the government's responsibility to provide basic health care, support industries, control pollution, and guarantee peace and order. I do acknowledge the fact here again that there are several constraints to good measurement of civic and political engagement because gathering of data on a full range of relevant civic and political behaviors is challenging, and a more long-term study is required on civic and political engagement among youth in India. In addition, participants also rated the game on 4 parameters using a 5-point Likert scale. The table indicates that majority of participants gained an understanding of the election process, developed a capacity to evaluate a leader's performance, and if he or she has kept their promises made during the electoral campaign, Participants also indicated that they understood the complex nature of resource management and resolution of problems in a democracy. During the discussions that followed the post-game survey, participants rated the game quite positively. The game is also quite dynamic because every time you play it, it's different. You play it with different players, the scenarios change, and students have the ability to collaborate and tackle different scenarios, which they find quite interesting. My concluding thoughts. Today, more than ever before, we cannot take democracy for granted. It is imperative that educational institutions find ways to explicitly and implicitly inculcate democratic principles in learners who may otherwise shun from engaging in civic and political dialogue. When institutions can curate spaces where learners can experience concepts in a pragmatic manner, hone their different leadership skills, institutions become incubators for citizens who will fortify the fabric of democracy. And what better way to create safe spaces, encourage learners to collaboratively solve problems, and engage in difficult dialogues than through game-based simulations? After all, according to game designer Eric Zimmerman, we are in the ludic century. According to Stuart Brown, author of the book Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens Imagination and Invigorates the Soul, play isn't the enemy of learning. It is learning's partner. Play is like the fertilizer for brain growth. We know what it takes to improve our brain and how it functions efficiently for the 21st century needs. So I leave you with this final thought. What if a teacher tells a student or tells her students, come on, so we're going to practice what we just learned. So let's play. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. I remind you, if you want, please catch them during the AMA session at the end of the day. So we have lunch now, so we will break.